The Summer I Turned Pretty is perhaps one of the most popular shows with a primarily female audience, which makes it a great piece of media to dissect when studying the female gaze. Everything about it, from how the characters, both female and male, are written, to how certain scenes are shot, practically scream that the show is a woman-led project, both in terms of who's writing and directing these episodes, as well as who they're for. And as a romance drama, it also shows us what women want and idealize in their romantic partners, as well as what they don't. This video aims to illustrate how the hit series The Summer I Turned Pretty, based on the books by Jenny Han, embody the female gaze through an analysis of its characters, imagery, and themes in an effort to figure out what women find attractive and how women want to be treated by their romantic partners. At least according to a 25-year-old straight male. And of course, I gotta talk about spoilers, so if you're not caught up in the series, here are the episodes that I'll be pulling from, as well as other pieces of media that I'll be pulling from too. Also, I've been told that the show deviates quite a bit from the book, so rough spoilers for those as well, but I'm not exactly sure. Now, in case you didn't already know, The Summer I Turned Pretty is Amazon Prime's hit teen drama series based on the novels by Jenny Han. What makes this show such an interesting piece in studying the female gaze, though, is that it's a story told almost entirely in the perspective of its main character, Belly Conklin, a young woman who experiences a glow-up and suddenly becomes attractive to her lifelong friends, Conrad and Jeremiah Fisher, her primary love interests whom she dates and flip-flops between throughout the series. She, along with her brother Steven, practically grew up with Conrad and Jeremiah, as they spent every summer together at the Fisher Summer House in Cousins, Massachusetts, a fictional beach town where many of the show's events take place. Now, there's a lot of things that happen, but the main driving force in the story is a love triangle between the main character Belly and the two brothers Conrad and Jeremiah, as they try to prove throughout the series that they're better than the other in an effort to win Belly's heart for themselves, which leads me to my first talking point, which is the female fantasy of the love triangle. See, something I've noticed in popular media is that there's a huge difference between the male romance fantasy and the female romance fantasy. The male romance fantasy typically revolves around the male character being in love with just one other incredibly well fleshed out character, or having an entire harem of women who are all just different kinds of attractive. Thus, he's either a man focused on a single romantic pursuit, or a man whore who seems to be able to attract women simply by breathing. The male fantasy is either that of true monogamous love, or harem anime. Meanwhile, popular female romances are typically love triangles. For example, Bella, Edward, and Jacob from the Twilight series, Katniss, Gale, and Peeta from the Hunger Games, Korra, Mako, and Bolin, and then Korra, Mako, and Asami from The Legend of Korra, and of course now, Belly, Conrad, and Jeremiah. And then there's like the pile of Spanish and Korean dramas that I can pick out from that also happen to feature a love triangle with a woman on the top. So what makes the love triangle such a popular trope in women's romance? Well, historically speaking, for the longest time, women didn't actually have a choice when it came to romance. In the olden times, women were pawns to be married off to create alliances between families and even entire nations. And this was a global reality, from the political marriages of Middle-aged Europe to the marrying up in the caste systems of India. While marriages born out of romance did exist, marriages were used to cement treaties, merge territories, and secure alliances between families, and this was especially true among the elite class. And in these marriages, women were never valued for who they were valued for their last names and their ability to bear children. Love and romance were completely out of the question, and thus the earliest love triangles played around with this idea. What is more important to a woman? Doing her duty to her family by marrying right and staying faithful, or pursuing a romance out of love? And when you get to classic literature, this is actually a pretty common theme. In Greek myth, Helen is married to King Menelaus, but she falls in love with Paris of Troy, and this of course launches the entire Trojan War. Then there's the Irish story of Isolde of Cornwall and Tristan. Isolde is wed to King Mark, but drinks a love potion and falls madly in love with Tristan, his nephew and best knight. And even the legendary King Arthur himself was involved in a love triangle. His betrothed, Lady Guinevere, shares a passionate but ultimately forbidden romantic affair with Sir Lancelot, Arthur's trusted friend and fellow knight of the Round Table. Depending on the depiction, some choose to portray Arthur and Guinevere as a loveless marriage, with the latter clearly more in love with Sir Lancelot. Men typically fantasize about having a harem because it's a power fantasy. Being pursued by multiple attractive women serves as validation for a man. But women typically fantasize about love triangles, or the idea of being pursued by two equally compelling romantic options, because there's more emotional attachment involved. That isn't to say that female harem fantasies don't exist, because they definitely do, but love triangles just happen to be more popular, especially in Western culture. In these examples, love triangles aren't just about the women choosing who to love, but how to live as well. A good love triangle is ultimately a woman defining the rest of her life by her choice of romantic partner. It's Guinevere choosing love over duty by choosing to have an affair with Lancelot. It's Katniss choosing peace and family over more violence and warfare by choosing Peeta over Gale. So in the Summer I Turn Pretty, what is Belly really choosing? And to find out, we're gonna need to look at her choices, Jeremiah and Conrad. Warm, fun, playful, and handsome. These are words people would use to describe Jeremiah Fisher, the younger of the two brothers. They're also words that I would use to describe my pet dog. In the series, Belly likens Jeremiah to a golden retriever, a breed of dog popular in American households for their energetic, loving, and playful demeanor. They're a great family dog because they're protective and loving of children and adults alike, and while they aren't the brightest dog when it comes to training them, they bring about a positive energy with them wherever they go and enchant whoever they interact with. And that is a pretty accurate description of Jeremiah too. Throughout the series, we see that he's a fun, charming young man who's the life of the party wherever he goes. He dances and sings, laughing loudly and proudly, and doesn't shy away from the spotlight. He oozes charisma and embodies confidence, giving him a magnetic personality. He enchants women and men in the show merely by flashing a smile at them and lifting his shirt up just enough for them to catch a glimpse of his abs. People also often describe him as incredibly physically attractive with his billboard-worthy body and sparkly eyes. Even Conrad, his own brother, and Taylor, Belly's best friend, admit that Jeremiah is simply the better looking one, and he knows how to play these cards to his advantage, being mostly successful in his romantic and sexual pursuits. This is an archetype of man that some women just love because it's easy. These kinds of men are agreeable, fun, and easygoing. Golden Retriever men are loyal, warm, and will never make you question their love for you. At least for the most part. But despite sounding like the golden standard for men, Jeremiah has his flaws. Despite having abs, it seems like they're just for show, as he's not particularly talented in the athletics department. On the show, he teams up with Belly for a beach volleyball competition in season 1, and let's just say that he's definitely not getting a best-selling manga about his skills. We also see that he's attention hungry. He doesn't just love the spotlight, he craves it and gets jealous easily. He's upset when Belly has moments with Conrad, or even just with Cameron. We also see that he's manipulative and kind of devious, and knows how to play people to get what he wants. Like in season 1, he plays a girl to invite Conrad to a music festival, giving him some alone time with Belly, allowing him to make a move on her and confess his feelings without the obstacle of his brother. And while his carefree attitude is fun and acceptable as a teenager, his lack of seriousness leads to him developing into an irresponsible adult, making short-sighted decisions and refusing to look at things from a big picture perspective. He initially passes on an internship at a VC firm, which he only got through nepotism, by the way, just so he can spend one more summer with Belly, showing that he values his girlfriend more than his own future. And while this may sound romantic, it kind of signals codependency. He humiliatingly doesn't graduate on time, not because of overly harsh professors or taking a leave, but because he couldn't be bothered to check his required classes for years and realized that he needed to take some extra core subjects. This is a mistake that could have easily been avoided and saved their dad an extra semester's worth of tuition. And then he may or may not have technically cheated on Belly, depending on your perspective, but he did leave her over a petty squabble and almost instantly hook up with another girl and hid this fact from her for months. And how does he respond when Belly finds out? He proposes to her while they're both students and have no clear career prospects nor plans for the future, and Belly, idiot that she is, fucking says yes. And while they're planning the wedding, guess who finally decides to step up and take control over his future, but in the process leave Belly to handle most of the planning and emotional load of the wedding by herself. Jeremiah is fun and exciting, which makes him great to be around, but when it comes to real life and holding down an adult relationship, his irresponsibility and childishness may make a relationship with him difficult, as we witness through Belly's experiences. And then we get to the other brother, Conrad. He's the older of the two brothers, and while Jeremiah is the fun and charming one, Conrad is the one that's responsible and more mature. Conrad doesn't have Jeremiah's charisma, way with words, or good looks, but what he lacks in charm, he makes up for in almost everything else. He's shown to be more capable than his brother in more ways than one. Unlike Jeremiah, Conrad's athletic. In season 1, he was being recruited to play college football. He's also a skilled sailor, being good enough to be awarded second place in a sailing competition, and knowledgeable enough to teach someone in the art of sailing. And remember that volleyball competition that Jeremiah played horribly in? Well, he subbed out for Conrad specifically, allowing him and Belly to win the tournament. Conrad's also an incredibly gifted individual in terms of intelligence. He managed to get into Brown University, an Ivy League school, and then afterwards transferred to Stanford, which is considered more prestigious. And at this point in the series, he's studying to become a doctor, an honorable, life-saving profession. And should he become one, it will have been through his own merit and not through being related to the right people. And he has a sense of maturity about him. Being the older brother, he was expected to be the more responsible one growing up, and it shows. His mother trusts him to take care of Jeremiah after she passes and to protect Belly as well. He's also mature enough to have genuine friendships with adults well beyond his years, like Laurel and Cleveland. And in addition to all of this, Conrad is Belly's first love. She's been in love with him ever since she was a child. But like Jeremiah, Conrad also has his flaws. He's already emotionally distant, and he tends to push people away in times of turmoil. When he discovers that his mother is dying of cancer, he practically spends the summer pushing everybody away, barely interacting with anyone. It's clarified that he does this in an effort to protect himself, because if he acknowledges that his mother is dying, he can act like it doesn't exist. But it's ironic because despite knowing that his mother isn't long for this world, he actively chooses to distance himself from her, and ironically spending less time with his dying mother. He also chooses to lie and withhold the truth frequently. He was smart enough to figure out that Susanna was dying, but he decided to withhold this truth from Jeremiah. He found out that his aunt was trying to sell the summer house, but instead of involving Jer, Belly, Steven, and even Laurel, he tried to handle it himself despite being a student. He lied to Belly in season 1 when she confronted him about the moment they almost kissed, and instead of telling his family that he got fired from his clinic job, which initially prevented him from going to his dead mother's memorial, he chose to withhold the truth as an excuse to not be present. And he did it because he didn't want to see Belly, his childhood friend and ex-girlfriend at this point, being lovey-dovey with Jeremiah. And then he shows up anyway, leaving Jeremiah to deliver a speech all on his own. He pressures himself to appear strong too much to the detriment of those around him and himself. For example, when Steven was hospitalized, Conrad was clearly not in the right mind at his clinic job. The doctor in charge notices this and offers to give him some time off for himself without any repercussion. But Conrad decides against it, and this leads to him making a mistake, mislabeling a blood sample. This is a critical error that, had it gone unnoticed, could have cost someone their life. And finally, he's also just kind of a dick, being unnecessarily mean at times to Belly, his aunt Julia, and especially his own father. And I think that's what makes this love triangle so compelling. Neither side is depicted as the clear right choice, as both men are deeply flawed, and yet both have their fair share of supporters. Much like with Twilight pushing the Team Edward or Team Jacob conversation, much of the marketing and online discourse surrounding The Summer I Turned Pretty revolves around the concept of Team Jeremiah or Team Conrad, deciding which of these two men, who despite their flaws ultimately deserve to end up with a main character. Does Belly deserve a man who will love her loudly and proudly, but who's irresponsible and childish, or a man that's mature and capable, but emotionally distant and cold, even to her at times? Now, the fact that there's a conversation about who's the better man for Belly kind of just proves an assertion that I made in my previous video about the female gaze, that there's no such thing as a clear-cut archetype of a man that all women will want, such as Silver Bullet just doesn't exist in real life. Some women will want the warm and loving support that Jeremiah brings, while others will want the stability, reliability, and maturity that Conrad brings with him as well. Even Belly herself flip-flops between the two at different stages of her life, being obsessed with Conrad at first, then accepting Jeremiah's feelings and falling back in love with Conrad, then falling for Jeremiah, etc. There may even be women who want neither. Shout out to my fellow Cameron enjoyers. He may have gotten done dirty, but at least he got some non-binary. But in the case of Belly Conklin, she actually does make a choice for who's better for her, and to figure out why, we need to see things from her point of view, which is a perfect segue to my next talking point. Now, in my last video about the female gaze, I talked mainly about what women find attractive in men through the use of women's media. And while I largely aim to do the same here, there is one aspect that I wanted to touch on in that video that I ultimately couldn't fit, which is how women's media is shot and directed and how it differs from other mass media. See, for decades, the film and television industries have been dominated by a male perspective. Movies were directed, produced, and written almost entirely by men for mostly male audiences, so many films were shot and cut with this in mind. Thus, the concept of the male gaze was born. This visual arts theory states that because most visual forms of media were made for the viewing pleasure of men, They were tailored to be enjoyed by men before anything else. Everything from how the characters were written and how movies are shot are curated for the male experience. And in this aspect, women got the short end of the stick. Historically, female characters were reduced to eye candy, sex objects, damsels in distress, and love interests with no real characterization. But now, with more women entering the industry, there's been a rise in movies and shows created with the female gaze, visual media directed with the female's perspective for a female audience. And the mainstream attention given to titles like Barbie, the Hunger Games films, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and K-pop Demon Hunters illustrates that women-led projects do, in fact, have a place in modern media. And The Summer I Turned Pretty belongs in that list, especially because it so unapologetically caters itself to the female gaze. First of all, there's a certain dreaminess about the show, and I want to focus on that term, dreamy. Culturally, that's a term that really only women use. The term dreamy usually denotes attraction, hence calling someone like Conrad or Jeremiah Fisher dreamy. Men don't use dreamy. They use hot or pretty or sexy, sometimes beautiful or even elegant, but never dreamy. And in the case of Isabel Conklin, she views certain things like Conrad, Jeremiah, and the town of Cousins with dreaminess because she idealizes these things. Thus, we get shots and scenes that glamorize them and emphasize their beauty. For example, when she first gets to Cousins Beach in episode 1 of season 1, there's a bunch of shots of the town emphasizing its natural beauty, accompanied by Belly's inner monologue showing her fondness for the place. While the town is ultimately just another small American settlement, albeit full of rich people, it's displayed with such love and tenderness, kind of reminiscent of how Greta Gerwig shot Sacramento in her film Lady Bird. And the same love is given when we first see Conrad, whom Belly has had a crush on since she was 10 years old. We get a slow-mo sequence of him walking up to her, really dialing in on the fact that she's Belly's ideal man. And speaking of ideal men, let's talk about how this show also loves to show off its half-naked men, whether it's Jeremiah and Conrad catching waves, or the first scene in season 2 literally being Conrad and Jeremiah standing next to each other topless, or close-up shots of Conrad's back or Jeremiah's hands. The show unapologetically gives female viewers a lot of eye candy, and I'm okay with that. If girls can sit through Megan Fox's scenes in the original Transformers film, I'm okay with sitting through these. There's a lot of emphasis on parts of the body that women seem to find attractive, while shows shot with a male gaze in mind try to squeeze in some shots of cleave, butts, and slim figures. This show has a lot of emphasis on hands, eyes, abs, chest, and back. It leads me to believe that these are the female equivalent to men staring at boobs. But one thing that men can learn from, though, is the kiss scenes in the show. See, in most forms of media, kiss scenes are kind of whatever now. Narratively, they're used to denote romantic interest between two characters and not much else. They're not magical, enchanting, or anything like that because they're just there to show that these two characters are involved with each other. But not in this show. In this show, the kiss scenes are directed to be hot. It's not just lips touching and then whatever. These scenes are unapologetically sensual. The guys aren't afraid to use their hands, pick their partner up, touch places they normally shouldn't, and they're unafraid to go there. Unironically, I think a lot of guys could learn how to kiss better just from watching the kiss scenes on this show and taking notes, especially considering the audience reaction to a lot of these scenes. Another thing that I found oddly works is the choice of music for the show. Typically, I find licensed music to be incredibly distracting, especially when it's from popular artists, but I found that it works for this kind of show. The Summer I Turned Pretty is about a teenage girl in the modern day, so why not throw in some Taylor Swift, Chappell Roan, and Olivia Rodrigo? I'm actually surprised at how well the use of licensed music goes with pivotal moments, like how when the show uses Taylor Swift's The Way I Loved You, a song about romanticizing a toxic love, when Conrad, who's been mistreating Belly practically the entire first season, comes to save Belly and she just lets it happen. I would imagine it's how a teenage girl would picture that moment and let it play out, and for that reason, it works. Now, we've talked a lot about the show itself, but up to this point in the video, we've barely talked about the main character, Belly Conklin, and there's a reason for that. See, one of the themes of the show is coming of age and becoming who you are, and what kicks off the events of the series is the summer Belly turned pretty, her glow up, and when she started becoming a woman in the eyes of the other characters. Because she looks differently, people look at her differently, and she gets treated differently from everyone, especially Conrad and Jeremiah. And anyone who's gone through a glow up will tell you that this is a very real phenomenon. I'm of course referencing the halo effect, which dictates that prettier, more attractive people tend to get preferential treatment feminine compared to those who are more plain looking. And this effect is amplified for women, as a lot of a woman's worth in society is based on her physical appearance. And while she's enjoying the attention, I still feel that as a character, Belly is still barely a person. She's fleshed out enough to have hobbies like volleyball and interests and friends, but as a woman, she barely knows who she is yet, which is also what makes it difficult for her to choose between Jeremiah and Conrad, because she is still in the process of becoming. In this sense, she's kind of the perfect self-insert character, characterized just enough to move the plot forward, but not enough to make her unrelatable to too many people. She's intentionally written to not have too many character traits because she just hasn't gone through life long enough to really know who she is. And this goes in line with one of the main images that we see in the series: water. Water plays a huge role in The Summer I Turned Pretty, both thematically and symbolically. See, a lot of the events of the show take place in the fictional beach town of Cousins, Massachusetts, which is, of course, located near the ocean, and the Fisher house that they stay in has a private pool. Throughout the series, we see that Belly feels most at home when she's near water. It's when she's at Cousins with Jared, Conrad, and Susanna and her family that she feels most alive, and when there's a lot on her mind, Belly will go for a swim to experience the weightlessness that water brings. To Belly, water symbolizes safety, permanence, and comfort. Even the show's title card is an underwater shot. Belly is very closely linked to water, because like water changing shape, Belly is in a constant state of change. Before the events of the series, we're led to believe that Belly is a bit of a tomboy, and then she signs up to become a debutante, and then she's fighting for a spot on her school's volleyball team, and then now is studying to be a sports psychologist. It's also why she flip-flops constantly between Jeremiah and Conrad, because she's simply going through life and needs what they provide, but at different times. In this sense, Belly is very closely linked to water, but so are Conrad and Jeremiah. Now, to be completely clear, I do have to mention that the show is still ongoing at the time of recording, but knowing how the books end, and since this show is based off of the books, it's pretty safe to assume that Belly is going to end up with the older of the two brothers. And that goes perfectly with the water metaphor, but it's going to take some explaining, because Jeremiah is like the ocean, and Conrad is like a swimming pool. Like I mentioned earlier, a scene that repeats itself throughout the series is Belly swimming alone. Usually this happens after some scene and she needs to clear her head or something, but notably, these scenes always happen in the backyard pool, never at the beach. And in terms of imagery, Conrad is linked much more closely to the pool than Jeremiah. First of all, when the boys do their belly flop in the first episode of season 1, which is the act of them picking Belly up and throwing her into the pool, Conrad is hesitant at first and is even the only boy to try to help Belly out of the water, which he uses as an opportunity to pull him inside. There, the two share a moment, but it is worth noting that Belly's first experience with water that we ever really get to see in the series is with Conrad, and that makes sense considering he's her first love. And the thing with Conrad's affection is that it's constant. He's always had a soft spot for her, making sure that her needs are met or that she feels included, even when they were kids. Like a pool in the backyard, he's always been there for her. And when he wasn't, like when he forgot Belly's corsage for prom, it's because he was drained, coping with the coming loss of his mother for most of season 1 and then her passing in season 2. It's because he was going through things that he wasn't able to give her the love that she deserved. And even when they're not together, he still does whatever he can to make her happy and make sure that she's taken care of, whether she knows it or not. While both his dad Adam and Belly's mom Laurel are initially unsupportive of Belly and Jer's wedding, he does help convince them to be on board and show their support without Belly knowing. He does these things for her not because he wants to win her over, but because he genuinely cares about her happiness, even if it's not with him. He also remembers the little things about Belly, like her fascination with the concept of infinity, which is why he gets her an infinity necklace, and remembers that Sour Patch Kids are her favorite. It's these little things that show that he's always watching, always caring, and always going to love her no matter what. Like a pool, Conrad's love has always been there. Steady, reliable, but also safe, quiet, and intimate. And just like how we keep coming back to Belly in the pool, Belly keeps coming back to Conrad. Contrast this with Jeremiah, who is in this metaphor, the ocean. Unlike a pool, the ocean is inherently unpredictable. There's the changing of the tides, the strength of the waves, and the random things that may wash ashore. There's excitement with the ocean, but there's also danger. These things can also describe Jeremiah. For a lot of people, the ocean is a place for fun. In fact, Belly's first experience with the ocean that we see is of her playing with Jeremiah by the shoreline. But it's also dangerous. If you try to go too deep into the ocean without proper preparation, you might find yourself getting carried away by the waves and lost at sea. Liken this to how everybody in their right mind tries to tell Belly that marrying Jeremiah under the present circumstances is such a bad idea, and telling her that she simply isn't ready. And if she goes through with the wedding, she'll lose herself and may never get the chance to know who she really is. She's already giving up on Paris, the opportunity of a lifetime, just to be with Jeremiah after getting married. But while we're worried that Belly's going to get lost by going too deep, too fast, we also know that part of the ocean is shallow. Jeremiah claimed to have always loved Belly, but I have my doubts, and think that Jeremiah is just being an unreliable narrator. Sure, he confesses to wanting more at times, but can we really believe that? Unlike with Conrad, we never got a flashback scene showing him giving Belly any special attention. We didn't get to see Jeremiah proving that he's always loved her and looked out for her like Conrad did. Jeremiah tells her that it's always been her, but can he say that when he's been promiscuous his whole life, and that he even broke her heart by hooking up with another woman twice without them properly processing their break? He only starts seeing Belly as a woman after she glows up, but she only really starts pursuing her after he sees Conrad and her about to kiss, a scene which he irresponsibly interrupts by aiming a firework near them. And I think this metaphor gets even more interesting when you think about the first kisses with each other. When Belly swims in the pool, frequently it's with Conrad watching over her, looking out for her somehow like he always has been. But which of the brothers does she kiss in the pool? Jeremiah, and there's a good reason for that. It's because he went behind Conrad's back to try and make a move on Belly, since he got Conrad to leave the two of them alone after interrupting the moment that they had with each other in the previous episode. He's going out of his element and sneaking behind his brother's back. Then at the end of the first season, when Conrad and Belly share a kiss, it's in front of the ocean, and this time, Jeremiah has no idea what's happening because in his eyes, he's linked with Belly. And finally, Jeremiah's love for Belly comes in waves. So far in season 3, we've seen that the cracks are starting to really show when it comes to their relationship. Jer is barely present during the planning for the wedding, and without consulting her, makes changes to the wedding venue and the invite list. He lashes out at Belly for not being able to get the cake that he wants because it's out of their budget, and when things are difficult, he storms off rather than trying to communicate and work things out, like with their fight before he left for Cabo. And then he tries to win her back with grand gestures of love and affection, like proposing out of nowhere, after they had broken up because it was revealed that he had hooked up with another woman twice and hid this fact from her. It's chaotic, dangerous, and scary. It's unpredictable and would cause anyone to lose their minds, and it most definitely isn't healthy. And I think that's ultimately the message that Jenny Han is trying to convey through the story of The Summer I Turned Pretty. At certain times in life, a woman might need to go to the pool, or she might need to go to the ocean. But eventually, she'll choose whichever makes her most comfortable. And for Belly specifically, it's the pool. It's Conrad. Because Belly is always changing. She needs someone who can support her growth no matter what, who will love her no matter what. Conrad has shown that he's always loved her. Doesn't matter if she's pretty or not. It doesn't matter if they're together or not. Conrad's love has always been quiet but consistent. And that's what Jenny Han is trying to tell us about what women want in a relationship. Because that's the ending that she wrote. But she wrote that ending for Belly. And not every woman is going to be Belly Conklin. We know that Belly believes in love and forever and lends herself perfectly to the typical monogamous life, so it's easy to see why narratively Conrad is the correct choice for her. But there are people who never want to settle down, so Jeremiah might be the better choice for some people as well. Some women will find Jeremiah's traits more attractive, others will find Conrad's, and that's just people being people. Not everyone is going to have the same views on romantic partners, nor have the same emotional needs. Different women will like different romantic partners at different points in their lives. But just because you're not her endgame doesn't make the love that you shared any less real.